Welcome back to the Win with Dice podcast, a podcast featuring members of the Win with Dice team. I'm Calvin, and I'm joined here by Ramon.
Hey guys, this is your first time listening to the Win with Dice podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about tabletop RPGs. Calvin and I take a casual approach to the hobby. So on this podcast, we talk about, all the games that we run and the games that we play and the cool, wonderful people that we get to experience the hobby with. If you're first time ever into tabletop RPGs, what are you doing? Go find a table, go get some games in. And if you are a player in someone else's game, maybe, hey, jump on the other side of the GM screen and give it a whirl and give your GM a rest. And trust me, it's not as hard as you think it is.
Indeed. And it's actually much more addicting than you think it is.
It is terribly addicting. You will simultaneously love everything you do and hate yourself because you have to keep on doing it.
True. So this week we have a recap of a session I wanted to get into, just featuring a new player joining the game and just everybody settling into the new party dynamic, as well as possibly running into someone who may be another big bad on their list of big bads. And we also have some Pasion stuff we wanted to get into this week. But before we get into all that cool stuff, we have to get to the most important part of the show, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week.
Yes, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week, brought to you by me. Well, I guess really got inspired by a Map Crow video. Map Crow is a awesome artist and super cool YouTuber who's cooler than us right now. He makes super cool, awesome content about monsters and how to fit monsters in your game better than just like the stat blocks and more of just like fitting it into your narrative and stuff like that. So I really appreciate his perspectives and stuff. Kind of made me rethink monsters and stuff and make me want to do more cooler things with them. But anyway, his recent video was about types, like building encounters and how to make your encounters better. And the way he kind of did it, I think we touched upon it before, where it's like you break down like what your monsters or bad guy NPCs are going to be. So like you have your infantry to gung stuff up and like kind of take up space. You have your brute who's really big and is really, really strong if they can get a hand onto a player or something like that, but usually kind of slow. Your cavalry, which is kind of like your flankers and skirmishers, where they move really fast and get to like get behind, your ranks as a player or as the party. The ranged guys, your elites, is usually a combination of a whole bunch of them, and your like spellcasters / debuffers and summoners. So the way that he did it, he was pretty cool because I'm also like I'm kind of into wargaming and stuff like that. He broke it up into ranks. So at the first rank, you have like your infantrymen who just their sole jobs to just tie up the players. Then the next rank would be somewhere like the brute and the cavalier. And the back would be like your summoner, your like mage or whatever, or like your elite. Even though your elite's kind of a combination of everything, usually they're the primary target. So if you want your elite or big bad guy to stay, on the field the longest, don't put him up front. Put as much stuff in the way as possible, so the players have to fight their way through. And also like make flanks and also make the battlefield asymmetrical, so it's like gives interesting ways for players to tackle the situation, as well as like giving players the ability to sneak around and find different routes just to like expose a flank or something like that. It's also a good way to kind of spice up combat. But yeah, just kind of ideas of just building out those ranks. Don't do this for every combat, obviously, because you're gonna blow your brains out and your players will hate you because like, oh my god, every combat is like a slog. But for those really important ones, it's good to kind of build out that kind of rank system, I guess, or like that kind of tactic system for that encounter. Definitely really felt it. Actually, I would say, Calvin, I've done this before at least once in my life, where I made a very complex encounter. I don't know if you remember when Macy was going to be tossed into the pit of hell. When you're fighting that witch.
I distinctly remember when you almost tossed my character into a pit of hell. Yes.
Yeah, that game, that whole encounter definitely had like interesting environments. My elite was very far away. It was a whole hell of pit in the way. You had to go around the sides. I had lots of brutes, lots of bruisers, some ranged people, some flyers. Like it was a whole smorgasbords of dudes that everyone had to fight through, and it was actually really tense and really fun. So yeah, definitely for the set piece combats, definitely just build out different flavors of NPCs and kind of fit them in this, and utilize them better than just have like 50 goblins or whatever. Make them all different.
I think that really works well for Pathfinder especially. I think it really shines a lot when you have different types of enemies that your players are dealing with, because they really have to work together and strategize together to figure out what works best for those characters in that group, and what they can counter, and what they can deal with, and which problems they have to solve first.
Oh yeah, and like the best part about Pathfinder 2 is that in like the monster, I guess, like race category of like goblin or like orc, they give you like the hierarchy of orcs or whatever, right? Like here's the orc leader, here's like a regular foot soldier orc, and here's like a specialist orc, right? At least in the base book, they give you at least 3 different flavors of whatever that thing is. So, you can just use them, plus like maybe some sort of like animal unit or like some sort of like creature or something like that spread along to make your encounters more cooler. So you could just do it based off, you just do it like one race, and Pathfinder's got you good for that.
Yeah. Definitely lean into the stuff the system gives you if you're playing that game, as well as just bumping something's level up and down by making weak or elite adjustments.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so there you go, folks. There's your tip of the week. Think about your encounters more strategically, categorize your NPCs, and move around the battlefield like they're little soldier men.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't seen all that video because I know it was inspired by Baldur's Gate 3, and I kind of wanted to play more of the game before I saw more of that video. I'm trying to get used to like D&D combat in that game.
You're like, where's my goddamn 3 actions?
Honestly?
What do you mean I only get to hit a dude once?
I'm really struggling with the concept of like an action and a bonus action. I just wish you could do the stuff I want to do. Although, since I'm playing a rogue, I leveled up, so I can now do more stuff with my bonus action. So I'm pretty happy about that. I
don't know, man. D&D, just give everybody just 3 actions. Don't copy Pathfinder. Do it yourself.
Yeah, I gotta play more Pathfinder games. So, speaking of Pathfinder, actually, one thing I wanted to mention, and I wish we could have covered it this week, but just timing-wise is impossible. By the time you're hearing this, or at least this Friday, that being Thursday, that being August 31st, they're having a stream around 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, so 7 p.m. for us in Eastern Time. So middle of stream, but they're having a stream where they're going to be starting the playtest of the 2 new character classes that they announced at Gen Con. Still don't know what the classes actually are, but the official playtest will start September 1st, so you'll be able to get your hands on them September 1st. But there will be a stream with the design manager, Michael Sayer, and senior designer, James Case, and they're going over the new classes and the new iconic characters. So I will try to catch some of that, but it's going to be Thursday, so I'm going to be streaming, so I will probably won't be able to see it until later. But if you guys want to see that, that is when that will be, and then the playtest will be the next day.
Yeah, it'd be cool too. We'll cover it next week, likely.
Yeah.
I guess next episode, if everything goes well and we're all still here in a week.
They do have a couple of like images of the iconic characters, just like really zoomed in and cropped images, and one is just like a beefy strong dude, and one is a person in a whole lot of heavy robes with scrolls maybe. So I don't know what to expect here.
That's exciting. I hope it's just like this man is just a wrestler. Like he's just like just gonna suplex people. That's what I want. Just, yeah. Just give him the Stone Cold Stunner, man. That's what I want.
Well, if that's what it is, we'll see by Thursday.
Yeah. Dope. Excited. I shouldn't be this excited for something that's probably not gonna happen.
You don't know yet.
It's true. It's true. I should let them tell me that I'm wrong. I shouldn't just tell myself I'm wrong.
Exactly. All right, let's get into this session recap. We're going to catch up with the Quest of the Fateseer campaign. When we last left off with that campaign, we had a new player joining the game as the party was recovering from a tough boss battle and an escape. The party now consisting of Solo, a human bard, Delorfek, a dwarf fighter, and the new character Nell, a human rogue. I think the rogue part's pretty obvious. As Nell's catchphrase is, "I am a rogue."
Okay, nice. I love stuff.
It. So they all recently got together. Solo and Delorfik had originally been hired to guide the NPC Brima, a gnome cleric. They were meant to be taking her to a safe location after some people were after her, but unfortunately the person they were delivering her to was also not entirely as not as good as they thought they were. Due to some demon infection that Brima has, the paladin that the party was bringing her to actually intended to keep Brima caged, possibly for the rest of her life. So the party managed to escape with Brima, and they were on the run and trying to figure out how to deal with not only this demon infection inside of Brima, but the demon cult, or the cult that worships the demon that she was once meant to be an anchor for on the material plane. And to that end, they ended up saving an observatory that had a piece of metal within it that the cult was after. And while there, they also ran into an old friend of theirs by the name of Koyel, who is a tiefling astronomer and student who was in the middle of doing some studies at the observatory before it was attacked by a bunch of demons and stuff. So, yep.
I had a question. I thought about it. It's one of those refrigerator things that you're like, oh man, that's super cool. But then after watching the movie, you go get a snack from the refrigerator, you open it up, and you're like, hey, wait a minute.
Fridge logic, yeah.
Who's in charge at the observatory? who's in charge of it? Where are the dudes guarding the thing? I mean, it feels like this is a valuable piece of equipment that lots of people would want to mess around with, let alone just yank out the magic rod that's in it. Why was Koyel just by herself?
So my thought, I didn't really bring it up in the game, and my thought process on that was just it's not really the time of year where you're mostly going to be using it. It's just didn't really have many staff around. And while it's admittedly true that there is a piece of expensive metal inside of it, that's not really an extremely known fact. If you're looking for that specific thing, then you would probably be able to find it there, and you would probably know that if you do research into it. But it's kind of a inconvenient way to get this particular piece of it's abyssium, by the way, which I mentioned last time. It's kind of an inconvenient way to get a piece of abyssium. If you want it, you probably have easier ways to get it than going to the specific observatory and taking apart this specific telescope. Although you're correct that they probably should have had more security on it, or actual people around. I feel like this is something Koyel's going to deal with off screen.
I was gonna say, I mean, she's definitely in trouble. It's why are all these dead bodies here?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
I don't know. Yeah, no, just one of those moments where you're like, wait a minute. This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, she's just like, I don't want to deal with this right now.
Yeah. She's just like, oh, it's fine. But okay, that's fine.
But yeah, they were able to hook up with Koyel, and they did stop to get some drinks and just try to relax after that encounter. And Koyel did mention that she heard some rumors about what the party had gotten up to, and that's for somehow they had managed to make an enemy of the followers of Sarenrae. And Solo had mentioned that they had to do something, they had to steal something for a good cause. Which seemed to be enough of an explanation for Koyel, because this group has saved her life twice now at this point. So Koyel offered them a place to crash for the night while they figured out the next step of their plan. And as they were settling into this tavern, Nell laid on the charm a bit as he was talking to the barmaid and trying to find some wine. Although the quality wasn't admittedly very great here. Though everyone else partook except for Delorfek, who just wanted something strong and cheap. Although Koyel did offer to buy. But just only one round, because she's not made of gold.
True.
So, during the time they were there, Delorfek and I think it was Solo or Nell actually also overheard part of a conversation, but the conversation was in Dwarvish. And they noticed a nearby dwarf and a half-orc having a conversation about something that had happened in a mine not too far from this town. So, Delorfek, being curious, went over. He started to introduce himself, and he gave the fake name Grundlig. And, of course, the dwarf was going to ask also, like, what's his clan name or his family name. So he used the name Brewmantle, which had come up previously as one of the fighters that Baruth defeated, actually.
Oh. Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
So in this conversation, there was mentioned that at the mine these two were working at, before they had left to go check out the fighting tournament, which was in a city to the south of where the party is now, they mentioned that there was a group of miners that had gotten sick after being exposed to something within the mine itself. And they had a brief conversation about that, how it just had happened like right before they had left. So they didn't really know what was going on with it now or anything like that. And when Delorfek returned to the group, he mentioned it. And to summarize the conversation that went on, because the group is already thinking about Abyssium as something the cult was looking for, they suspected it might be that, because Abyssium is something that if you're exposed to for a long period of time, it does cause sickness. It's basically like magic radiation.
Mm-hmm.
But it does also have certain planar properties that aren't really as much emphasized in canon Abyssium, but I'm kind of leaning into them a bit more.
Right.
It does have planar properties that could potentially be used to sort of like bring something in from the abyss itself. Like as far as like a physical summon, your options for which plane to go to are kind of limited. But if you wanted to bring something from the abyss and you had a lot of it, that is something you could use to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So with this sort of idea bouncing around in their minds and knowing that the cult is after this material, they offered to these couple of miners that they would go and check out the mine and see what it was that was actually making people sick, and they just kind of tried to pass themselves off as like experts in metallurgy, I guess. So they figured out what they wanted to do next. They do have a couple of options to get to the location where the mine is. Basically one being a route that's like physically shorter, but it does cut through a mountain. The other one being a bit longer, but it goes through a city where they might be recognized in a time when they don't want to be.
Oh, nice. Actually, I like those choices. Like, do you want to hit the, like, if your party feels confident about like their disguises or anything, then maybe they can go through the city. But if they feel rugged enough, maybe they could climb the mountain. That's kind of cool. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I like putting those kinds of decisions out there and then just sitting back and letting people debate them.
Yeah.
I like moments where there's no like correct option whenever possible.
Yeah, it's like maybe something that's like it's mostly just based on what the party's capabilities are and like what their status is and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So again, Koyel offered them a place to stay, which is basically just like a shack that's not too far from the observatory itself. Not a whole lot of room, but they were able to get some rest indoors. During the night, though, Nell got a secret mental message that I don't want to spoil too much about here, but it was maybe very interesting.
Ooh, a secret mental message from their dark boss. I was like, what a leader?
Something like that.
Team lead, like it's like, what's the word? Yeah, their manager. Where's the TPS reports? We need that by Monday.
Yeah, something like that.
Uh,
uh, so despite that, in the morning, Nell, I mean, well, more because of that actually, Nell was one of the first ones to wake up in the morning and saw that Brima had woken up pretty early as well and was just like watching them. And then Brima was just commenting how she was kind of worried about how everything was going to be affecting the rest of the team. And she just kind of wanted to make sure everybody was still okay, and she just couldn't really tell if Nell was actually breathing. So she was just kind of like leaning in and staring.
Nice.
Because she's like, at this point, she's like constantly or subtly, as subtle as she can be, trying to make sure everybody is okay and just checking in on everyone and making sure they're all safe and healthy and everything. And then we got into some fun stuff here because they were both up. Nell offered to do some baking for breakfast. So,
Oh, wow. Okay, that's so funny because that's not a very rogue thing to do. I don't know. I just like that.
Not.
This character just keeps having so many facets to them.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about Nell is that they have their expert rank in baking lore.
Nice.
So, yeah, so the two of them started to just make some cookies, which is very cute. Borrowed some ingredients from Koyel, including some ginger, and set about to baking some cookies, and Brima did her best to help because Brima had kind of like sort of like an isolated childhood, so this isn't the kind of thing she did too often, at least not baking treats super often.
Yeah.
So she was getting really into it, especially with the quality of cooking that Nell was able to provide with like a 27-28 roll. Eventually Solo and Delorfek were able to wake up as well, just to the smell of this cooking. Delorfek approached, but then Nell like slapped his hand and they said, like, go get cleaned up and go get dressed and then you can have breakfast.
Nice.
So yeah, everybody got back together. Koyel showed up as well. Delorfek had commented after trying one of Brima's cookies that it reminded him of his grandmother's, which I thought was very sweet.
Such a wholesome campaign, man.
It was a really wholesome session. After like the last three.
So much stress and drama in the last ones, and then you're just like, yeah, now we're gonna bake some cookies.
And Koyella was also like, I hope you're leaving some of those behind. And then Nell was like, yeah, what are you going to give me in exchange for them? And then Brima was like, yeah, what are we gonna get for this? And then Koyella and Brima had a whole side thing that I didn't want to act the whole thing out, but
yeah,
Koyella was just like offering like random things she could find around the place in exchange for some of the cookies. Like, here's this astrolabe. But there was one moment where Koyel was like referring to Nell, was like, I think I like this one. And then Brima, being Brima, was like, I like this one too. And there was a moment where Nell just sort of like paused and just froze for a moment in reaction to that before continuing what they were doing. Which could mean many things. So,
I like to think that it's a good thing. Hopefully, you know, their dark backstory isn't so dark, and you know,
we'll never know.
We'll never know.
We'll eventually know, but we'll not know anytime soon.
Right.
So after that, they met back up with their two miner friends. The miners, again, they put out the suggestion of like which different routes to take. The dwarf was kind of a bit more cautious about wanting to go through the mountain and saying they should take the long way around. The half-orc was like, "No, you worry too much. We can handle it." And wanted to take the shorter route. So the party eventually came to the agreement of just taking the shorter route. And then instead of doing my normal travel stuff, I instead changed it to more of a skill challenge. Because I just wanted to mix things up a bit as far as travel goes. I'm still experimenting with that. I do like how the skill challenge turned out, but I'm still experimenting with how I want to do travel stuff. Because as much as I like it, it also does take up a lot of time.
Right.
So, instead of having to narrate each day, I just kind of summarized it with different roles in this skill challenge. Although I did specifically need like a survival role for navigation, which would have consequences later on. But they did pretty well in the challenge. They got several... I was just counting the number of successes they got before the number of failures they got. Wherein, like, depending on the difficulty class, a regular success counts as 1 and a critical counts as 2, and then same for failures. They did manage to knock it out of the park. They rolled, like, 3 20s in this start of this session. And they got two crits in this skill challenge. So yeah, they really knocked it out of the park. They didn't actually get any failures, except for the failure of navigation, which caused an issue as they were getting towards the end of their travel. The path they ended up taking, it was leading them through a cave, and it would pretty much, like, the next day they would probably get to where they were going on the other side. But as they were approaching this cave, they could hear the sound of something heavy and some like heavy footsteps coming out of it and some heavy breathing. And they found themselves in the path of a cave giant.
Oh, nice. Oh, you haven't used a giant yet against these guys, have you?
No.
I don't think I've used a giant either, to be honest with you. Yeah, weird.
Not recently. I know we fought some before.
I don't think in any of my campaigns.
I
mean, there was a giant lady, but she wasn't a giant.
I'm pretty sure we fought some giants. It might have been like a long, long time ago. This might have been like first edition.
Fair enough. I guess that doesn't really count.
Not anymore. But they ran into this cave giant, who started off with throwing rocks at them before charging in to fight them. He was able to sink a lot of damage, especially with like a fighter and a rogue flanking him. I was trying to get the cave giant to do... So the cave giant has this really cool move where it almost worked. He moved up to Delorfek and he kept shoving Delorfek close to this wall. And the cave giant has an action where if they attack something that's adjacent to a wall, they can like literally smear it against the wall. And they do heavier damage and also get to grab the creature that they attack.
Oh, cool. It's kind of like a wall splat, like splat.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's what I was aiming for. Unfortunately, Delorfek was just a little too quick and I wasn't able to actually make the attack work.
Damn. That slippery dwarf.
Right? He got some good swings in, though. I don't mind. Although, interestingly, I don't know how I feel about this at the moment because I feel like I was doing too much stuff with Brima, and I'm worried about her becoming like a DM NPC or DMPC or whatever the term is.
Yeah.
But Brima was actually the one who landed the final blow on the creature as she fired off this ray attack that managed to take off its last little bit of health.
I mean, it's only a problem if the party's like, hey, that was mine. But I'm sure everybody was like, sick, Brima did it.
Literally.
I think there's a difference. There's a difference when a DMPC just shows up and like just takes all the glory, while like Brima, like every single person had to be a parent to the small kid, right? It just feels like it's like less of like, you know, like the DM, like it's just like a separate person. She feels like family at this point. Like just like, oh, look how cool of an adventure you're turning out to be, kid. You were once an NPC and now you're a friend. Like,
yeah, that's like I'm really glad. Like again, I'm really glad that people like Rima. That's why I like to do those little moments and things of just her commenting on stuff and then just, you know, being all cool and adorable, and also like she's a lot tougher now than she was at the start.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, she's been rolling deep with these boys for a very long time. I mean, I don't know, it's not very long in terms of like I think the actual travel time, but just like in life experiences, like Dreama's gone through a lot, so it kind of makes sense that she's able to like hang with these seasoned veterans, right? A little bit,
Yeah.
or at least, it feels like anytime Brima like does something cool, it feels earned because you had to put all the effort into Brima in the beginning and make sure she was like, you know, taken care of. And it's like Brima is still like a kid, even though she's able to fight like any other adventuring person, but she still like needs to be taken care of in other ways, right? So it doesn't feel bad. It just feels like it feels good.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. That's why I'm glad that's working so far. But yeah, Brima was able to take out this giant. Everybody was celebrating her. Delorfek took note of the giant's craftsmanship because the giant had like this belt of like animal skulls, and Delorfek was just like, I could make something better I could make something way better than that. But they did need a place to stop and rest because, well, they need a place to rest, and additionally, they had seen like a giant bat flying around earlier. Right. They did have the cave this giant came from, but it was pretty smelly and actively getting worse.
Ew, that's not good.
There were like animal bodies and carcasses lying around that Nell had noticed, and Delorfek had pointed out the makeshift latrine that the giant was using. So Solo offered to...
Yeah.
It was terrible. But Solo... Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'll keep interrupting you, but I was going to say, that's what's missing in more dungeons is a latrine. Like, anything that's there, where are they going to poop, right? Like, you need a place for the poop, so you got to put it in, you were designing a dungeon and being like, this is where the poop goes. Like...
It needs to exist.
Yeah, they need to exist, right?
So Solo used his unseen servant to start trying to clear out the mess here. And
Ew, that poor servant.
I was like, yeah, the unseen servant, even though you can't see it, you can sense its hesitation. It's really not happy. Because the unseen servant is basically like this invisible force ghost that does whatever you tell it to. And this thing has been used to like set off traps before, but it sees all of this and it's just like, you sure? Really?
Oh man. Rough day on the job.
Yeah. But it went to work and was able to clean up the cave enough that they could get some rest in there. Their two companions who had said that, the cave giant wasn't there last time they were here. They had offered to take watch while everybody settled down. During which time, Delorfek and Brima were talking about Delorfek's grandma's cookie recipe, and Brima was just like trying to commit everything to memory so she could try it later. Meanwhile, Nell was feeling kind of fidgety, which Solo took notice of. And further asked in conversation, just like if anything was wrong, and just Nell was just saying how, they just want to get off the mountain at this point. And then Solo asked if there was anything he could do, and Nell commented that, they wanted to... They wish they could soundproof the cave, because they wanted to play some music, but the cave would obviously make the noise more noticeable.
Right.
But Solo had a composer staff, which has a spell that can summon an instrument that only the user can hear. So,
okay.
Yeah, so Solo just offered that to Nell, which I thought was... I'm really glad everybody's getting along, and no one has any reason not to trust anybody.
I know, it's not like some dark, mysterious forces are working in the background.
Nope, not at all.
Everything is cool. We're all friends here.
In the meantime, Delorfek and Brima were having a conversation, and Brima admitted she was worried about, like, what could happen if they're not able to, pull all this demonic energy out of her. Delorfek just said, if push comes to shove, after all this is done, we could all go live on an island safely somewhere. And Brima was just like, yeah, I don't know how well Fandrovo can swim in that heavy armor of hers. I don't know. It's sometimes weird to talk about Brima as if I'm not the one playing her and she's doing her own thing, but she kind of is doing her own thing, if I'm being honest. She also mentioned that she kind of likes the adventuring lifestyle and she wants to keep doing it if possible. So, who knows? Maybe Brima will be a player character at some point in the future if I bring her into a different campaign.
I was gonna say, like, maybe in the future after this one concludes, Brima gets her own story. Well, she's just like, and now I'm the adventurer, gonna find, taking my this tiny demon kid across the place or whatever, right? She's like, the story just continues, just falls back onto itself.
That'd be adorable.
Brima wakes up one day, just remembers all the good times. She's like, oh, I remember.
The whole campaign's a flashback.
Yeah, the whole campaign's actually just a flashback.
But yeah, they were able to get some rest. They took individual watches. Nell took watch and then noticed that one of the cloud formations kind of formed like this vaguely humanoid shape of a familiar figure, but just couldn't really recall the name, and it just kind of faded away before they could center on it. But the next day, the party was able to... Which, I mean, that could mean anything. But the next day, the party was able to reach the city of Dandaral. They were able to arrive in this place. They were taken to the Fodaros Mining Company office, and there they met Theodora Fodaros, who is the sister to Simon and Alvios, who they had been dealing with way back, the one that they had stolen the sword from and for.
Right.
Back in our little vault adventure.
Yeah.
And then just getting a look at Theodora, they could tell that while she had the same sort of like composure, similar composure to her brothers, like it was clear from her dress that she was maybe a bit more willing to get actually involved in mining, like actually getting into the mine itself. Like her clothing was a bit more rough, like still well put together and probably pretty expensive, but not like, clean robes or anything like that.
Got you.
So Nell helped lay on the charm and introduced the group, mentioning that they have experts here who can help with figuring out exactly what it was that made the miners sick. Theodora described that, they had gotten through to a new cavern recently. And as they had been digging deeper into this cavern, just some of the miners started getting sick, so they all pulled out. The party was able to go to the infirmary to check out the people who were sick, and they were able to confirm that it was abyssium poisoning. So they returned to Theodora, they explained what was going on, and Theodora had also mentioned that there was another group that made a very similar offer, a group of gnomes who had made a very similar offer to investigate the mine itself, which set off some alarm bells because the demonic cult that the party has been dealing with has been entirely gnomish. So they rushed down into the mine itself, and after a short trip on a mine cart, where they were able to pick up like some basic, they also got like some basic equipment like pickaxes and stuff.
Yeah.
But when they finally got down to this one particular cavern, they saw it had like a couple dozen different gnome cultists within it who were all making moves to take from a hole that they had recently dug out. They could see like this large chunk of this glowing blue-green this mineral, this actual abyssium that all of these guys were just taking pieces from.
Yeah.
And getting in there, they were addressed by someone who seemed like a leader of these guys. He was wearing very similar black robes, but they were also adorned with like reddish flames that sort of started at the bottom and then curled towards the upper parts of it. And he was addressing them with this very calm and collected tone at first. He mentioned that he had expected to run into them some time ago back in like Silverhill, which is the place where they were. That was where they first met Fandrovo and everything, and then things kind of exploded and kicked off. But he was basically saying that, he intended to take Brima, since they just bought Brima to him. Which obviously the party wasn't very happy with. Dolorfek managed to charge forward and land a blow on this guy. And so a few things happened at once here. Dolorfek was kind of moving forward as he was having this conversation, but the other gnome cultists were sort of like keeping an eye on him. He was able to land this blow. He got it in pretty quickly because he did roll a crit, so in all fairness, I'll give him that. But in retaliation, he got blasted by this negative energy spell from somewhere to his side. And as he turned to look, and with his own dwarven dark vision, he could see the form of another young gnome girl wearing very similar black robes with a flame adornment, who had just blasted him with a spell. And looked like really about the same age as Brima.
What?
But the leader was pretty pissed off about being just struck out of nowhere. Though he ordered the other gnomes to retreat, and he's being pulled back by this gnome girl. And as he was able to tear open some portals. And from those portals, they could see, the party could see holes into the abyss itself. And a handful of demons just kind of like spilled out of them. A bunch of flying imp-like creatures that were being led by this goat-headed demon that was carrying a flaming sword.
Ooh, sick.
And that is where the session ended, because we're about to get into a fight in the middle of this mine.
Nice. That's awesome. I love it when demons are goat-headed and flaming sworded.
Yeah, man, I love portals just dumping stuff out. Here's some problems from this hole. But yeah, that is the session for the moment, and they've come face to face with the leader of this demonic cult and his mysterious lieutenant, who knows what the deal is there. I mean, I know, but
there's a possibly Brima 2. Mega Brima.
Maybe. Yeah, there is stuff going on. There's plate spinning. They've got a cult in front of them and a Vendrovo behind them. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, definitely between a rock and a hard place. Like
True. But yeah, I'm really enjoying that campaign. I'm glad people like Brima. There's a lot of fun stuff that I want to do that I hope that I'm able to squeeze in. I have an idea about the direction things will go in, but it's going to depend on what ends up happening. What the party ends up choosing to do. But that is... Or we'll leave that recap for now. Now, we do have a few extra minutes, and we do have this Remaster Core Preview. We could get into that a bit, or we could save it for its own episode.
It's up to you. I'm not sure. I just went through the document really quickly. It's nothing too crazy. Some kind of what I thought was going to be the changes anyway, so...
I feel like we could do a deep dive with an episode, but maybe we could just look at some of the things that stand out the most, or like some of the larger changes, or some of the changes that we want to talk about.
Well, there's this crazy spell called Blazing Bolt that I want to talk about.
Sure.
Yeah, it's crazy. I like the design of it because it's like typically I find that typically in Pathfinder, it spells usually 2 actions because you're combining like a specific element or another like debuff or something to it, or another status effect to it, right? So really you're getting like the 2 actions, like the 2 actions equal to 2 outcomes, which is damage and like on top of another thing, right? But I like Blazing Bolt because Blazing Bolt's it's 1 to 3 actions, so you can choose, but you can when you use it, it still you're affected by the multiple attack penalty, but like you only affected by it like afterwards, after it's done. So whatever the attack is, you just make the straight attacks. If I'm reading that correctly, I might be wrong. But 2, the more you use it, like the more actions you use, actually like increase the amount of damage. So it goes from like 2d6 to like 4d6. And I like that now in like the way that it's actually set up in the stat block of the spell. It just tells you what you're rolling in. So in the defensive, they just kind of looped in like if it needs a saving throw, it'll tell you it needs a saving throw. If it's against AC, then it'll tell you it's AC. So then you can just read from the top being like, oh, I need to roll my spell attack or whatever.
Yeah, that was something I actually really liked about the way they lay out spells now, because like a lot of them are like basic saves, right? But you would have to check the actual text of the spell to see what the thing you need for saving is. Is it actually a basic save and stuff like that? I appreciate that because that's something that's very important for the spell. It's just right up front.
Yeah. And additionally with Blazing Bolts, you could target multiple people with multiple Blazing Bolts and make different attacks, right? Which is like pretty cool. It does lean towards you firing at least 2 bolts because then you get the extra damage. But like, I just like the idea of you having the option, as well as like focus abilities, like focus spells and the whole focus point system. I wasn't a big fan of because I think it was like figuring out how many focus points you had was a problem.
Yeah.
But now you just get a number of focus points equal to the number of focus. I think it's focus spells. You know. So it's like the more focus you put on the focus stuff, the more you get out of it. So the more you can be able to use it. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, I also really like how they changed the refocus ability, because it pretty much works the way people assumed it works. Because previously, you could only like refocus if you had spent a point. It was sort of a thing that you could only refocus up to a certain amount, basically. Like just basically recharging 1 point at a time after having spent a point already.
Yeah, but now you just get a point.
Yeah, exactly.
10 minutes and you just get a point. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, which is it's just much better. It lets people actually use their focus spells, because I haven't really like I have them on Teeks, who's a druid, but I haven't really used the focus spells a lot because then I'm like they're very limited, especially compared to other spell options. Well,
yeah.
No, I shouldn't say that. They are as limited as other spell slots. They're just more complicated to recharge.
Yeah, and it's like they're meant to like bridge the gap between like having cantrips and like just need something a little bit above a cantrip, right, to use, because cantrips are your use any, like there's no limits, there's no spell slots to it, so you just use them until like a bigger threat shows up, and then you have to decide whether or not you want to use your big blasting spells or whatever, right? But I think it's supposed to kind of bridge the gap, because really 10 minutes of rest means like you could have it like maybe every encounter or so, every other encounter, because eventually you're gonna need to take a rest or chill out, or like maybe there's some downtime where you're like someone's trying to do something that isn't fighting a monster, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes more of like, I wish they just used the words like per encounter. You get to just get it back if you just don't have a fight in the next 10 minutes. But I kind of get it, like that kind of stuff is why like 4th edition wasn't very successful in its initial showing. So yeah,
true.
I get the reason for the language.
A lot of the people we've talked to do like 4th edition, so
you know what? I think a lot of people like 4th edition, but a lot of those people also like the cool tactics games that are kind of out at the same time.
They are all Lancer people, so yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. So get that shit on the grid and it's awesome. Right? I think that 4th edition was gave a lot of clarity, and there wasn't anything to like misconstrue in 4th edition. It was just like, this is the cool shit you can do, very clearly laid out. Like this is your use on everything ability. This is use on your once per combat. This is like once per day, so this better be useful, right? It's better be on something that's really important that you want to kill. So yeah,
those are always hard to know what to use.
Yeah.
One random thing that stands out to me is cause like there's a lot of stuff that I really like that they are renaming. One thing that came up in the session actually is negative damage, and that's being replaced by just calling it void damage. because negative
Yeah.
is just like, you know, a term that they use to describe like energy from like the negative plane or whatever. But obviously, like if you hear you take 17 negative damage, then it's like, does that mean I heal?
Wait a minute. Maths. Like.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just really funny because that came up in that session. But I like that that's being changed. I do actually really like. Actually, if you play on Foundry, you might notice that they already updated some stuff. Like flat-footed, I've seen called off guard on there, and that's the new term that they're applying to it.
Yeah.
Or the new remaster term.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I like that. I was scrolling through some of the changes and like the spell names, and even they in the document here they also renamed all of the genies. They give them like way crazier names, which I'm like actually all about. But I love how like they just changed like Ifrit to Ifrit, and it's like done.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no.
No.
Yep.
I don't remember. I have to look at what the old genie stat block is. But if this for some reason this feels like this genie has way more stuff for some reason. I'm like, where this thing keeps going. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I like that they also gave him like spells, but also like these are just like he's just a dude with a big spear. Here's a maneuver called skewer. He just skewers you. Like no extra fuss or muss, just you got skewered, dog.
Yeah, there were. I know there were 2E genies in one of the books. I just don't remember what they were, but they did get a lot of updates in Rage of Elements because they're so closely tied to like elemental stuff.
Yeah, it's cool, and they did make reference to it as well here. They in their I guess their flavor blurbs and stuff like that. They even mentioned in I think the Ifrit one how like the elemental planes of the really discovered planes of metal and wood, the Ifrits are really mad and want to burn it down. They're like, yes, the Dominion of Flame longs to melt and burn these new planes. So, you know, bad guys be baddin'. And, yeah.
Indeed they do. Yeah, I think we could do like a deep dive on like stuff like the attribute boosts and the alignment stuff. I think that could be like a whole chunk of an episode.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll save it for one. But I will try to remember to provide a link to the preview document below, so people can check it out if they want. But I think that's going to do it for the episode for now. Maybe next week we'll get into this document or into some more recap stuff. But I think that's going to be it for now. Roman, was there anything else you wanted to cover on this document now, or do you want to save it for another time?
Yeah, I think that's good for me.
Okay, well, thanks everybody out there for tuning into this episode. If you're into all this sort of fun stuff, definitely check out the rest of the podcast episodes we have in the podcast playlist, including more Pathfinder stuff, Lancer stuff, some Starfinder stuff, and a whole lot of sessions that we get into, and a whole lot of fun stuff that we really enjoy about all of these games. And while you are checking out our other stuff, please check out the gaming streams, which are on Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays. There's some new stuff starting. I'm gonna try to make Baldur's Gate more of a regular thing. The upcoming Friday will probably be the finale of Divinity Original Sin, Divinity Original Sin, and then we'll go into some Baldur's Gate stuff by next week. Thursdays, I think, are going to be Alan Wake, and then going into Control after that. And Sunday is going to continue to be the scary space game of Dead Space 3. Yeah, it's yeah.
Dead Space 3. The space is even deader.
Right. They brought the regenerating guy back, and I don't like it.
I'm going to be so happy when you're done with that game. Okay, just the idea that you're playing it freaks me out.
I will say though, Dead Space 3 is a lot more actiony than scary so far.
I don't want any of it. Oh, body horror freaks me out, man. Oof.
Oh yeah, no, it's worse in that. Yes.
The graphics keeps getting better.
Yeah, no, they do a lot more of the. I mean, now I don't know if I want to describe it. You just you have to be more careful in making sure there aren't any dead bodies around, because they do a lot. They have a lot more guys who can revive those like in 2 seconds.
Oh no, no, please no. I don't like it.
So yeah, if you do like it, definitely check that out. Additionally, I want to shout out all the people we have links below. If you're into Lancer third-party stuff, we got a whole bunch of Lancer third-party creators down below. You can go check out all their cool things. If you're into superheroes and tabletop RPGs, then I would recommend checking out the Untold Stories Project channel. They have a new series that will be starting in the Tuesday time slot, and they're going to be doing a bunch of fun one-shots and stuff towards the end of the year, as they always do. So definitely go check them out. I'm really excited for the new series. It's gonna be very fun. And it's I don't know what to expect from it because I'm not actually in it, so I'm really looking forward to like meeting all the new characters. But that's all I have for now. I can't think of anything else I have to provide a link to, but if I remember it, there'll be a link in the description. Ramon, anything else you want to mention before we head on out of here?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Well, for all of our mountain climbing GMs and players out there, just remember to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.